And tonight, some really intense Doctor Who debate that will get you behind the sofa as we go live with the Sensor channel.
Well, State of Decay, or as I say, Tired Old Tale. 22nd of November to the 13th of December 1980 we're going back to. My God, I do feel my age. The Wasting, as it was going to be called, or the Witch Lords, or the Vampire Mutations. So we're going to be looking tonight with our original panel, freely assembled again to look at the State of Decay. Now, bit of housekeeping for the usual reasons. If you've got suggestions for shows you want us to do, senseless3@gmail.com. Get us on X as well. If you want to come on as a panelist, you're free to invite yourself. If you already have subscribed, since we mentioned the Swarm, let's increase the army of censor rights and get Swarm in the YouTube streaming services out there, yeah? So it's better than the Wasting, isn't it? You'll see our favourite segments. I say favourite segments, ironically. Bringing perspective to the classics. What would Ncuti's Doctor do? Yeah, that's there. Do not disturb Sutek. Yeah, because we've got the same old problem with Sutek. And a new one. Oh, ho, ho. Intimacy Watch. I'll tell you more later. So I think it's important that I remind everybody that we judge on 3 criteria, and we're going to try and keep it as objective as we can, even though deep down we're quite subjective as fans, aren't we? So we've got our 3 big criteria we'll judge State of Decay on to try and be as fair as possible. And obviously to do that, I need my panel. And of course, doing that is going to be quite funny because I think they've all got very strong opinions. So let's kind of introduce the first one. Let's see where we are. Oh, yes. Oh, well, where's he been? Where's he been? We've got one of our original crew. Let me just get you in big lights there. It's our original. This is your introduction, John. Are you ready for this?
Good.
Yes. So I've assembled my own tired, stale husks of a ship of state.
All right.
Our own Glaswegian Orcon of curmudgeonly gruel, John.
It's going well. So
do you feel welcome?
Well, when people say things like, where has he been? And then you say stuff like that, it's fairly obvious. Getting over it.
You've been dying to so and of course it's like his Glaswegian twin. Here he is, and he's got an intro too, so let's get him on. Hiya, Hugh.
Hi.
Another member of our original crew, Hugh, whose love of Portuguese portraiture has infected how he likes to be presented on all streams and in all aspects of his life. He's a living portrait. Look at him. He never does landscape. He's known for it. How are you doing, Hugh?
I'm not too bad. Not too bad at all.
You're looking very good in portrait. Yes.
I always do. Slimming.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I better in landscape, I have to say. You get a bit of spread.
Yes. Yes. Very filling. Right. And of course, if I'm talking original panelists, we also have Michelle, and she's got an intro as well. Our own Cruella de Vil of reviews in Virginia, Michelle. There you go.
Well, I don't
Let's do
skin
that.
animals, so beyond that, I have been called a devil and a couple of other things that go with that.
Have you? Oh God.
And that's only by us.
True.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that's mainly been my coworkers. Oh,
And that's to your face, because you know what people are like on here. I tell you
Yeah.
what, right. Look, right. I like to be objective and I like to be authentic. And I also like to
So
be
you like to be objectionable. That's what you
and I like to be transparent. Here we go.
Yeah, I saw through you years ago.
So just so you know, I've got skin in the game, so to speak. This is me as Batman. Yes. So when we were talking about bats, there we go. That's me when I was looking after fruit bats. That's Sammy the fruit bat. So just so you can see there, yes, I used to look after them. I've had them hanging off me.
Yeah, so yeah, not much for him to perch on there.
No. They can look quite scary, but yeah. But once you get used to them, there you go.
Adric.
Well, I tell you, I'm feeding all the lines here, and of course, it was because I was fruit bat tracking. You'll see me on the back of a truck there, holding an aerial, going through the jungle.
Yeah. Are they trying to push you off? What are they doing?
They're trying to lose me.
I
But-
don't blame them.
But I have to show this shot. Knowing how cheeky you can be, I thought I've got to show you, since I'm showing me in the jungle with the bats. I had to have this shot because this was my toilet in the jungle. You know, they're going about the I'm a Celebrity one. So here we go. Here's my. There you go.
Is that a Dalek base?
Yeah. And what a view. That was the best view I've ever had on the loo, I have to
it's
say.
still loading. We can't see it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there was always lots of mist there. It was called Mount Sorrow in Cape Tribulation. Captain Cook was not in a good mood because he crashed. So there you go. So that's me, Batman. And oh yes, lads, if we're talking about getting the old crew back together, who's missing, John?
Oh, not that old man.
Come here. He's been auditioning. This is his audition for State of Decay. So here he is.
Oh,
Go on then. This is your big moment. He's been rehearsing for ages, knowing he
That's
hasn't
good.
seen you, John, and he hasn't
Yes.
seen you, and he hasn't seen Michelle for ages. Go on then.
It is the time I was awakening. I've been wasted for too long in my resting place. But now the big one will rise.
oh,
Oh, the big. Remember, he's called Willie Stroker. I mean, I don't know where you're going.
is that so? When he says he's been wasted, you have to be wasted to appear in this toot. So, what? Who are you supposed to be? Are you Ocon? Are you Camilla? Who are you?
He's been putting the makeup on. Look,
I'm Ocon.
Ocon.
Yeah.
he's all
So
wrong.
listen, I wish you weren't Ocon. I wish you were a walk-on. Now walk off.
Oh, what? Oh, hold on,
Walk
John.
on by.
Walk on by.
John, he wants to have. John, will you give him one more go at the audition?
Off you go. Let's have it.
Come on then. Come on, try get the words in the right order.
I have been the big one and am
Oh.
now wasted after being rested for too long. Wishing I was the great one rising.
It's not going to happen. I'm wishing I was.
No, I get wasted if I have a large one too. But that's thin.
I think Willie Stroker is going to be rested. Do you want to try next week? Okay, then clear off.
His age, he's not got much in the way of blood left anyway, so he's not much use to us.
No. Go on,
No,
then.
yeah.
Willie Stroker, go back to your own private pursuits.
Can I say, for that alone, it was worth returning.
I mean, he as soon as I said John's coming on, he said, "Can I do an audition for him?" I thought, I don't know where we're going with this.
Why do I feel my inner Simon Cowell coming
No,
out
the
here?
No, the truth is, I've seen better acting from the bat pellets that are left on my porch at work from the
Yes.
bats that live in the
Ooh,
house
that's
that,
harsh.
that hang around. Yeah.
That's
I
harsh.
would go as far as to say that dreadful woman in Planet of the Spiders, Jenny Laird, delivered a masterclass compared to that.
Imagine We haven't got on to Adric yet. You better wait.
Oh, yeah.
Oh dear. Well, at least we're prepped for it. At least we're prepped.
Oh, hold on. One more interruption from Nobby the Nobot.
Oh,
Hello.
Hello,
Nobby.
Nobby.
Hello,
Hey,
Nobby.
Nobby.
Hello, darlings. Hello.
Oh, wait a minute. He's got a bit lovey.
Oh, yes. He's a bit like John Levine. He goes all the way back.
I do. You know, what this story needed was a great injection of hard tech sci-fi.
Yeah.
Yes.
As I used to say to the dear Billy. Oh, no, that is.
Ah, Billy.
Oh.
I said his historicals need dropping, Billy.
What needs historicals need dropping? I need
I thought he said historical.
Yes.
I thought something else had already dropped.
Would somebody call off comment, please, quickly?
Did
Robots, darling.
Nobby have a fling with K9 during the filming of the show?
Chameleon. No, sorry. I know, not in this show, yes.
That's my takeaway from this. Historicals need dropping. Dear Billy. Dear Billy.
Go off with Willie Stroker's resting. I tell you what, talk about the wasting. I tell you what, Jamie's wasting his talent on me.
Well, Jamie is a lucky man.
Oh,
The historicals need dropping.
he's been hoping for the rising, but no, sorry, I'm not.
Anybody watching this has got a real sense of where all this is going, and it's arrived there even before I thought we would.
Yeah, I think this is the quickest we've done this.
Yes, and that's another one there as well.
So, people are wondering, I'd love to see Brendan, Michelle, John, and Hugh back together again. And now you can see
that. Nobody's ever said that.
I think it was Willie Stroker.
Be careful what you wish for.
So, I suppose we should get back to the story. So, State of Decay. I'll just throw in some of the notables first, as we often do in our reviews. This was actually the first story Matthew Waterhouse filmed.
Never.
It's apparently it's Lalla's and Matthew's favorite story. The Peasant Salute was referenced in Three Wise Monkeys. Tom Baker had a perm because he was ill.
Yes.
Terence Dix and Peter Moffat were battling hard with Christopher H. Bidmead on Focus. And there were an awful lot of things that I'll kind of intersperse through that you may have read about as well, where there were bust-ups with, Matthew Waterhouse seems to come up quite a lot. Bust-ups with costume designers and everybody.
Does Matthew Waterhouse not also come up quite a lot in Castrovalva? Or is that something else we're talking about?
What, you mean when he was in his little bondage trap? He was in that web. So, and of course, ratings, since we were always strict on ratings, started 5.8. Part 3 seemed to hit a right low, and then it kind of recovered itself. But we're hitting the fives.
So I'm just trying to remember, what's the date of John Lennon's assassination?
Yes, early December. And
so whether that might have had an effect just in terms of stuff, because I remember, because I will point out that John Lennon's assassination happened one day, but the day following on BBC, they had The Flip Side of Dominic Hyde, which is better science fiction than most things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
John Lennon was killed on a Monday U.S. time because it was announced Monday Night Football.
Yeah, we got it sort of like Tuesday morning.
Yeah, because it was very late on the East Coast time that he passed, and actually there's a famous video of Howard Cosell, which was a very famous American football broadcaster, announcing it in the middle of the game that John Lennon had passed away.
Okay. It's possible because part 3 does look a bit dodgy there in the dip in front, but I may have a reason for that in my own estimation when we do the review proper. Yeah. But I think we need to kind of slip in, trying to get the different variations of perspective and humor in here. So I think I'll do my first element, which has been introduced to me, and I'm so grateful, by RTD2, because as soon as he wrote his Sutek script, it's changing everything. So I'll ask the panel. Exactly. Mm-hmm. I'll ask our panel the question I have to ask every time we do a review of any classic now, and here we go. sorry, I have to ask. When you were watching this E-Space trilogy and you were watching State of Decay, did you find that you are thinking, where the hell is Sutek?
I tried to forget that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing it back into my brain.
Right, surely Sutek's thinking, where the hell am I?
Yeah. Well,
What
exactly.
is this? I mean, especially when you get into Warrior's Gate and you're, is it like in strange emboitments or whatever it was?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
the charged appointment, yes.
Yeah, can I just say that I'm with Michelle here. I think I tend not to think of that because it's giving all that garbage headspace and it's living in my head in my brain for free. And but to do it for a bit of fun, yeah, we can imagine. Sutek's obviously comes with a green tinge in E-Space, so he's obviously a Glasgow Celtic supporter in that case, or he would have been for the length of this the duration of these stories. But no, again, let's not give Russell Tavis any more space in our heads than he already has claimed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The thing is, if you were a script editor dealing with this aberration, you'd say, how does this work out in every story? So E-Space, as Hugh's kind of hinting at, why would this god, I know he wasn't really a god, why would Sutek want to be parked in E-Space? Wouldn't he just jump, if you're a hitchhiker, just jump out the blooming TARDIS before you enter E-Space? And of course, it's amazing that when the Doctor and Lalla Ward got out, I mean, there he is. I mean, why didn't they spot him? And did they spot Susan Twist? Because wasn't the story saying there was an avatar of Susan Twist everywhere as a trap?
Mm-hmm.
So, unfortunately, it just, you think, yeah, now they need to, like what they do with the Blu-ray collections, they're going to have to add special effects all the time now.
Brendan, I refer the honourable gentleman to my earlier comment. I'm not giving this headspace anymore, ruin my head. Fun.
There is something there that says, if we got rid of Sutek in this universe, but there must be Susan Twist that exists in E-Space.
Yep. And there you go. Although I like that shot. I'm very proud of that shot. It looks as though he's doing something to the TARDIS, but there you go. He was a dog after all, in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. I will always ask it because, he's raised it as an issue now.
I understand.
But what we as panelists usually did when it came to doing our good old reviews is we started with our burning issues. And I normally asked our panelists, what were their burning issues and do they need to see a doctor? So here we go. So might as well start with John, Elsie, Finlay, and the whole lot because we're outnumbered by them all. So,
yes.
John, burning issue, watching that State of Decay again, something to remind people, we normally ask something that you might even like the story, but it might be controversial. Within a good story, there's something that, you can nitpick at. So anyway, burning issue, John.
And it is just like we mentioned before, it's the presence of Matthew Waterhouse totally spoiling. I love season 18. I do. I love season 18. I love all of season 18 in its entirety. And I eventually got used to Matthew Waterhouse and Adric. But in this story in particular, he can't even walk properly. He doesn't know how to position himself. There is nothing there to suggest that this is a person who should have been holding the studio door open for the cast to get in, let alone joining the cast on the studio floor. He's embarrassing. And more to the point about being embarrassing, he doesn't know it. He just doesn't. If that was me, had I been lucky, and I'm of an age with Matthew Waterhouse, had I been lucky enough to have been given the break that John Nathan Turner gave him, I would have been all over that cast because it's a very rich and very fantastic cast trying to learn my trade. But Matthew Waterhouse isn't even trying. And it just sticks in my craw. Apparently, from what I've read and doing a little bit of research for this, is that the role he takes would have been the role that Ivo and Martha's son would have had, the boy Carl, who says a couple of lines and vanishes. So Terence Dixon has to find a role for Adric in that. It's a very small role, but he finds a role for him, and he's taken the role off what would have been their son, and probably played and been much better for the story. But this is a man who's just going through the motions. And if you ever listened to the commentary on this, which I did when it first came out, Peter Moffat is relentless in his condemnation of Matthew Waterhouse and why are you doing it this way, Matthew, and why are you doing it that way? Apparently, he couldn't even throw the dagger, which he does throw at Zargo,
Yes.
properly at him, and had to be done several times before the stunt corner. The wonderful Alan Chuntz, who'd done loads of stuff with Doctor Who beforehand, just said, "Look, that'll have to do." He's a very lucky boy. He's a very lucky man, but he spoils.
Wasn't this, John? You know, everyone goes on about DEI or inclusivity or representation nowadays. That's their agenda in any discussion. But actually, if you look now with Adric, isn't this a kind of box ticking again then, which is wrong? We'd had Harry as a male companion, Stephen, Ian. We hadn't had many, had we? And maybe Jonathan Turner thought we need another male companion.
Nothing wrong in that.
Yeah.
Cast him properly. Now, yeah. I can't speak for the dead. And thankfully, I can't also libel the dead. I think there was slightly more in the casting here in terms of Jonathan Turner's figuring than perhaps we would like to talk about on an open forum like this. But I think there was a certain keenness for his look, and that may have influenced the decision made by John Nathan Turner that he liked the look of Matthew Waterhouse rather than the acting prowess of Matthew Waterhouse. But we got what we got, and that was it. And ultimately, Adric was Adric, and that was it. We all got to live and breathe what happened to Doctor Who in seasons 18 and 19. But what he does do, he stands like a sore thumb, particularly in season 18, because he's in State of Decay, because he's just so bad, so awkward, that he can't put one foot in front of the other or throw a dagger properly. And he just takes what would have been a perfect season and starts to annoy me. You know,
yeah.
Growing. So it's even Megalos I enjoy more so than anything.
Well, like you said, that first time when as a stowaway he's walking in the TARDIS, like you said, was so weird.
Because he's more interested in finding his mark. There's a scene where he's in the crypt, I think it is, and you can see that he's looking on the floor. Where's my chalk mark? Where do I hit? And it really is ridiculous. But then again, I don't blame the boy. That was him, or the boy as he was then. It's the producer I blame and his motivations for casting somebody who fancied more than somebody who deserved it.
Do you think I'm therefore very unlucky? We're talking about our age, because obviously people have referenced that maybe I could have been Adric. And there you go. I could have been trying to get my marks.
I can't unsee that now. That's awful. That's awful. That's like Adric's big sister.
Oh, don't you love the pajamas? So, however, John, I'm coming to get you.
Take that off, quick. Take it off. Oh God!
See, John could have been a kind of companion too. I didn't put your Tegan up. Don't worry.
Please don't. Since that was made, since that was AI'd, I've had to grow a beard to distance myself from that.
He's on the run. Anyway,
not me, Gov.
Just to play with this mirth for a moment before I bring our other panelists in. As part of this kind of, I did look as though I could possibly have been Adric, but I don't think I could have been Dodo.
Dead ass, certainly.
Yes, yeah, Dodo or
dead as a dodo. So
this is why they became extinct.
Yeah. So, Michelle, a burning issue for you.
Oh, I had the second John, just Adric. He was the most annoying, stuck up, know-it-all, little twat character.
Don't hold back.
Oh my God! Ever I was John Nathan Turner manager, I'd be firing him so bad. And also when you hear what he's supposed to be doing behind the scenes, I'm just being a little jerk. Yeah. Oh, what a piece of work character.
It's the bit I don't understand. I look, you can be lucky and picked for a role and all the rest of it, and badly directed sometimes, but I don't understand why we get all these stories, and there seem to be many.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than just one. I mean, and it goes on into season 19, and what he supposedly said to Peter Davison on the first day of his job.
And Richard Todd in Kinder. And of course, here, I hadn't read them out, but further on the notables here, Tom Baker and Lalla Ward were not talking to each other at this point, but they both disliked Matthew Waterhouse.
It brought them together.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
they ran off and got married just on the basis of that.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. It says Matthew Waterhouse was rude to costume designer because she would not let him go to the canteen in his costume. He went to introduce himself to Tom in the pub, and after waiting 2 hours, went over and was told to pee off by Tom.
Yay!
I mean, honestly, so
I mean, I've been an extra once in a documentary, and you do exactly what the director and the producer and the costume director tell you to do. You stand there and you do, and you mess up, and okay, you retake it, and you do exactly what they tell you to do.
Yeah, I don't know what I can't speak for Matthew Waterhouse now, although I did see him with you, Brendan. Was it? Oh, I can't remember. I saw him at convention at some point anyway, and he's still as annoying ever. I actually get up and leave the room. He's still an entitled little man who struck it lucky. He got very lucky very quickly.
Yeah.
Good on him, but I don't take the Lalla Ward gets into trouble for apparently bullying him, picking on him. She was defending hardworking BBC staff who were just trying to do their job, and this was a little entitled sucker, who basically was so much in love with what he thought he was becoming that he was prepared to do sort of treat them like underlings or whatever. Just not nice.
Right? No, yeah, they're the ones that know more of the business than you'll ever know.
Absolutely. And apparently he did damage himself with that same dagger which he couldn't throw. Apparently he dropped it and it stabbed himself in the toe. Just a shame he didn't bounce up and stab him right in the face.
But this is the point. He was seen in Full Circle as apparently the artful dodger type. There's no way Matthew Waterhouse in any shape or form is an artful dodger type.
No,
I don't think.
no.
Doctor Who trying to do working class. Please try again.
To be fair, consider yourself part of the furniture works because he's about as animated as a piece of wood.
He is, yeah.
Bring back Chameleon.
Remember the lovely line in Doctor Who magazine about Matthew Waterhouse when they sort of let people know what cast members are up to now, and Matthew Waterhouse appearing in a production of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, playing the wardrobe.
The wardrobe.
Well, maybe there's a rumor that actually the way Adric was in season 18 and 19 give them ideas for Chameleon.
I'll take Chameleon.
Chameleon sales. Sorry, Michelle.
I'll take Chameleon any day.
Me too.
Tell you what, considering it's Matthew Waterhouse and Adric, we're giving an awful lot of airplay there. Hugh, are you going to bail us out on your burning issue, or is it going to be a troika?
No. I've got a different one, which is we've got this village which has to send a sort of a tribute to the lords in the big tower, and everyone knows who everyone else is, including all the guards. But they all turn up and say, "Is this the best you've got?" Well, it is the best they've got because they appear to have no children apart from the one child who was Adric's replacement in terms of that, who gets whisked off. They obviously know that that's the only young man in the entirety of the village. Not only are they de-evolving in terms of how they run things and not understand technology and losing knowledge, but there's no one there living. It's absolutely tiny cast, and it makes no sense for the lords of the manor to have reduced the village to 4 old people, one of whom's half blind and deaf. It's just ridiculous.
What do they call it? White male and stale, but I'll say turnips. That's what
it's just, it's not a functioning village. There aren't enough young people to produce other young people.
I think, Hugh, you've been unfair because that lady who was, she looks old, but actually she's bred the whole village, so she's just
she's exhausted. It's one of those really annoying things about whenever you go to do it.
Also, because if they're the only ones producing, I mean, they don't have a family tree; they have a family trunk.
Yeah, to an extent, that rolls on to the idea that you could be told that those people were on the spaceship look exactly like 3 people who are still lords, and then you turn up and you don't immediately go, well, they must be the same 3 people because they are the same 3 people. And there's no one else for them to have reproduced with because there's only 3 lords.
Mm-hmm. And just if you take it to Rebel HQ with Kalmar and all, doing their best to be Adam and the Ants, just about the same time as Adam and the Ants. I don't think that bunch of good guys are doing any procreation with any nice-looking females anytime soon. There was a dearth of females in that Rebel HQ as well, so I don't think there's any new fodder for the 3 people coming from that direction.
I think
if she has 3 teeth, she's a beauty.
I think since we said Matthew Waterhouse may have been, circumvented in the audition process, I think the whole cast and village here were the BBC canteen. That's what they look like.
Yeah, it's straight out of BBC Central Casting. Yeah, if they were. I think the afternoon before they formed a soup queue in a Z cars. And the morning before that they were an angry mob outside protesting on the set of The Brothers because they were striking that day. So they were just wheeked in, put a bit of new, more romantic makeup on, some stuff like that, and stand there and look angry and bloodless.
Yeah, well,
the peasants are revolting.
That's bloodless is typical because you guys don't get a lot of sunlight. So I mean,
But I have to tell you, every single one of them moved beautifully in comparison.
They did old very well. They did the selection very well. But he looked as though he was Bobby Charlton mixed with a Mavellan.
Yeah, that's a sort of Robert Robinson sort of straight from the set of Call My Bluff with beard.
This is going to be my burning issue in a moment, but why do they in science fiction seem to think, well, he won't have a comb over, he'll just end up doing it. I mean, honestly, why does that look sci-fi? That looks just stupid. Giant haystacks going through a bad patch. It's like so anyway, my issue and
lucky cultural appropriation today. I mean, that would be accused of
exactly.
I am tempted to start smoking a cigar called Hamlet. For those who are old enough to remember the advert.
Yes. Well,
Fisher, yeah.
So you see, in my thumbnail, I've raised the question, State of Decay, was a tired tale of stale sci-fi tropes. I've written down state of narrative disrepair, a tired tale, sci-fi tropes, they're all there. God almighty, where do you start? In many ways, Tom Baker was not on top of his game. I know he was unwell as well. So tired and stale, good voice. So Lalla Ward was given an anemic part in this, although she thinks it's great. Adric was Adric, a husk of an actor. It wasn't working, was it, on all cylinders? So I can get into the reads in a minute with us all when we move on to the plot and all that stuff. But I just found it a tired tale. And as I was saying to Hugh just before we started the stream today, it felt the whole thing of East space. I can see what Christopher H. Bidmead was trying to do with the sci-fi element. But we know that this was the classic tale where you had Terence Dicks, the writer, and you had Peter Moffat, the director, battling with Christopher H. Bidmead. Do we go Hammer House of Horror or do we go sci-fi? And I think State of Decay looks as though it's in a state of confusion.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing in terms of the E-Space trilogy is that an awful lot of the sort of like tropes, as it were, are also in full circle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't feel. It feels slightly odd that they've used something that's a very similar type of tale again.
Yes, because when we talk about the wasting and the horizon and everything, in Full Circle, you had that element with the Marshmen, didn't you? So I know there was a. Yeah,
and the confusion of knowledge and the knowledge that some people had and some people didn't, and sort of like it just felt a bit. Why are we doing this immediately after we've just done Full Circle?
Yeah. Now, John, you are obviously an absolute great fan of this season, and of course, I'm not parking it in a bad place like E-Space. But what I want to ask you and explore this is, you hear what I'm saying? While you enjoyed season 18, where does State of Decay fit in that? Because I do think it's a bit tired formulaic,
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not as down on it as perhaps you are. Yes, it's formulaic. It's a sort of structure we've seen before, not only in Doctor Who before, but in the season before. But it's written by somebody who knows what he's doing. I've got a lot of respect for Terence Dicks. He wrote perhaps the most deftly crafted Doctor Who story ever in terms of the horror fan rock. You know, just all the elements are there of just a perfect Doctor Who story. You know, and it does what it does. It's Decay less so, but that's just because I think it's got the hand of Christopher Bidmead on it, and I like what Christopher Bidmead did in season 18. I think it had to be done, but I think in this instance he was wrong. Doctor Who needs variety, and it needs this the sort of gothic setting to make some of it work. Though, and the whole notion behind this was a society, it was a culture, it was a state in terms of the political sense of that word in decay. So yeah, that worked for me. And yeah, there's a whole you can pull it to shreds. Absolutely, you can. But I think the performances, and they are certainly very theatrical, for want of a better phrase, in their performances. I think you get away with it. And I can project myself back to wintertime 1980. And in comparison to the previous winter when we had Nightmare of Eden, to me, I just had Doctor Who back. And Doctor Who was attempting to scare me and was doing lovely things again to make me frightened. Vampires, nighttime scenes, bats, blood, you know, theatrical performances, this sort of gothic setting. And I just thought, yeah, Doctor Who's back. And that's one of the reasons I think I'll forgive some of the, you know, sort of the silliness of the plot, the sort of the lack of meaning. And if you pick away till it all falls apart, you can do that with a lot of Doctor Who anyway. So yeah, I'm very forgiving of this because for this season, Doctor Who, certainly in the wintertime, was back on form.
Yeah.
Can I say something like, I think it's one of the most interesting seasons in Doctor Who, in part because of what Chris Bidmead was doing, and in part because you also have a clash, and this is one of them. I don't think this quite works, but I get what John's saying about season 18. I think there are at least 2 stone cold classics, probably 3 in it, and apart from Meglos, you put up against it any other season, it's very, very strong.
Yeah.
And stuff like, you know, the very fact that this is then followed by Warrior's Gate, which I think is a work of utter brilliance, especially at the time. And you end up with Logopolis, which I think is brilliant, and is properly using the Christopher Bidmead science fiction. And it starts off with the Leisure Hive, which is just lovely.
Mm. Mm. But I think what Bidmead should have done is allow Moffat and Dix their way here without trying to change it to that sort of sterile unit that it was meant to be set in, and surrounded by all this sci-fi palaver that was going on during season 18. That's a technical phrase, palaver, just so you're aware of it. Yeah, it is. And allow us, I feel like a more stereotypical gothic type Doctor Who in that slot. And I think the script, or the script as edited by Bidmead, was working against what essentially I think Dix had planned and what Moffat wanted to do with it. I think for my tuppence worth, this is the best Peter Moffat directed story. I think it suits exactly his style, and he does his wonderful glass shots and all the rest of it, which is very typically 70s and early 80s BBC. So yeah, but I think Bidmead has probably allowed some of the plot meanderings to take place, but had he not interfered, it might not have been as bad as it turned out. But I can forgive it anything because I just think it's fantastic. I do.
As we just kind of, we're going to tease into one of the criteria in a moment, but if I just kind of give you 2 different quotations, everybody. So years ago, Radio Times, give it 4 out of 5. They said this is Terence Dix's penultimate script for Doctor Who, gushing with invention and wit. In fact, it's amongst his cleverest and gives an already striking season 18 a tremendous shot in the arm. And it goes on to saying it was a throwback to the golden age of Hinchcliffe and Holmes and all the rest of it. But then Mark Campbell of Doctor Who The Complete Guide very recently gave a different version. And obviously, if we can explore this for a moment, he said he was less than impressed. 6 out of 10 he gave it, describing it as a limply directed vampire tale that doesn't really gel. The horror should be more explicit, the vampirism more obvious. One feels the production team deliberately didn't want to plagiarize Hammer, which, considering the Hammer-esque script, seems a mistake.
Brendan, who wrote that? Just give me again the second
That
review.
was Mark Campbell of Doctor Who: The Complete Guide.
Yeah, and is he aware of the fact that this was going out at 5:10 on a Saturday afternoon, that we couldn't do full Hammer horror? That's just a silly.
Yeah.
In terms of a review, well, I'm not disagreeing with what he said, but in terms of a review, it's just silly. Doctor Who can be full on Hammer. Doctor Who can't even show blood, So
Yeah.
let's not go there.
I suppose it's the hint, like the Pyramids of Mars. We all know the mummy moment. You didn't see it, did you? You just heard the scream.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, where do you stand on that? You're here in your two stools there of review.
You know what? For all of his faults, it's still fun because I am like so disheartened after this last season and how I felt let down, that the fact that anything that I consider to be like classic Who or fun, I just give it a pass at this point. So is it perfect? No, but it's still a fun romp.
Yeah.
So we're forgiven the fact that they didn't bear. I mean, the vampire thing, I know it says it's light on the vampirism, but I actually thought that was one of the things that maybe made it, as you said ages ago, John, theatrical. They were trying to be almost balletic, which didn't work. It was worth an attempt, but I didn't think it worked because you could have walked fast out of there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like,
And it's of its time.
Yeah.
It's of its time. I mean, it's there's a hint of Kate Bush in some of it and stuff like that. And as John's already mentioned that in the answer, I think it's. Well, again, I've mentioned before. I watch the Web Planet with awe because people try so much in that, and I think they try. I think this is trying to do something and it doesn't quite work, but that's what Doctor Who should be doing, is trying to do something.
Worth the effort.
I'll tell you something, 40 years later, 40 years on, watching this again for the review, 40 years on, for all it doesn't have the money, for all it's filmed by not one of Doctor Who's better directors, competent director, but not one of the best. It's filmed on a studio floor most of the way. It's filmed with a fourth wall missing, with the camera pointing. He's got an actor who doesn't even know how to walk, let alone act. But you know what? For all of that, it was still far more entertaining than anything I've seen recently in Doctor Who. And there's a lesson there for anybody watching this. So we can pick apart the plot, we can pull apart some of the nonsense that's going on there. But does it entertain? Absolutely it does. Is it attempting to preach to us? No, it's not. Is it trying to keep us going for 25 minutes between football results and Larry Grace's Generation Game? Yes, it is. And yes, it does. And it does what it's supposed to do. And I hear earlier, the year before that, Nightmare of Eden Times, I'm saying, Doctor Who was just basically looking at saying, listen, we're cheap, we're a bit frolicky, and the script may have been better because Douglas Adams had a hand in it, but it just looked a mess. It looked cheap, it looked nasty, it looked tacky. Doctor Who's starting now to look, properly, probably authentic again is probably the best term I can give it again. And it's just great. It's good. So let's not look back on it and pull it to shreds because it's not amongst the best Doctor Who. No, it's not. But it's still darn good Doctor Who.
Well, I'll debate that later, but we'll move items on as we go through it. But I've got a new item here. Obviously, oh yes, I mean I'm up to date with as a Who fan, and obviously for season 2 of New Who, they've employed an intimacy coordinator for the staff, so that we're all assuming what is going on that's going to be presented. But it means it gives me another invitation to actually look at classic Who and go, well, did they need an intimacy coordinator then? You might like the music on this one, John. It might be right up your street. Ooh. Sex, darling.
I'll wait.
There you go. I mean, do you need a strip joint when you've got the intimacy coordinator watch?
Well,
It was all I could do to keep everything on at that point.
I was expecting George. I was expecting George to come in with a lap.
now we know how he hurt his leg.
Mhm.
In all seriousness, Brendan, when I read your Facebook message about that yesterday, I did throw up a little bit in my mouth.
Did you? Do you know what? You get your money's worth on this review. We put passion into it. So my serious point, though, and I'll give you some examples, because obviously you haven't been thinking of State of Decay and if there was any dodgy shenanigans going on that needed an intimacy coordinator. But I've been thinking, and I have to say, it does give me some fun when I look at this. Adric hypnotized or zombified on the bed. Orcon looked very interested in Adric. I thought that looked problematic, and I think needed an intimacy coordinator, because it's all about when an actor's close to another actor. It doesn't necessarily mean sex scenes, does it? It just means when they are in proximity. And so basically, Adric and Orcon, there were a few moments where I thought it's just strange, and Adric needs an au pair or a chaperone, and I think he does in the TARDIS, as we have always said in our Sex in the TARDIS discussions. My other point I had was the Camilla and what's his name? Kinclopper Castle? I don't know. Sargon, was it?
Zargo.
Yeah. Camilla and Zargo, with all that movement and everything, as actors, not that they were doing anything sexual, but they would have to work on that intimacy-wise. And the sacrifice scene, oh my God, Doctor Who always has to have a sacrifice scene. And I thought in this one, I'll get my Tupperware thin and John will just bite on it, which
What?
is... Which is...
What are you suggesting?
This was so formulaic that, you could see Terrence Dicks doing this in his sleep, thinking, I'll have a sacrifice scene that delays us getting to the rocket piercing the heart of, and it'll just kind of keep everything creeping away for long enough, and then nothing will be needed. We had it all, didn't we? And of course, the sacrifice scene, I suppose you need an intimacy coordinator to check that actually... particularly it tends to be the females, Death of the Daleks, Sarah, blah, 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 Image of the Fendal, seem to do it all the time, don't we, sacrifices, just to protect them. Can you think of any cheeky moments that would need protection in State of Decay for intimacy problems?
Hold on, can I just go back about 40 years, hopefully? Just what actually does an intimacy coordinator do? How much are they paid, and where do I apply for it?
I'd love to know. I know.
You're
I mean,
missing your call, John. You're missing your call.
So it's all about generally it's about sex scenes and what you can show and stuff like that. So the actors don't feel forced into doing stuff that they don't feel comfortable with.
Science fiction program for children, families require an intimacy.
We have absolutely no idea. So we had a discussion on this, and the problem is if you've got an intimacy coordinator for Doctor Who, you're doing something wrong in Doctor Who.
Absolutely,
that's why I threw up in my mouth. I mean, you expect that on Bridgerton, you expect that on some steamy soap opera. What is this family show that's supposed to be for children that's on Disney Plus needing an intimacy coordinator?
Yeah,
and it was not for intimate sex scenes. It was for how people relate to each other. What the bleep is going on this set?
Yeah, I think it's more than likely that unfortunately Doctor Who has more budget now than it knows what to do with. So it's employing an awful lot of people to do things perhaps which are probably not required, because I get the fact that in sex scenes that actors, be they male or female, might require sort of advice about how to coordinate that particular scene, how intimate it will be, how explicit it will be. I get that. But here we are, it's Doctor Who, so what is that? Is Ncuti shaking his booty in somebody's footy face? I don't know. What's going on next to scene? Do you know?
Well, the truth is, because I was discussing it with Rachel, who obviously is been in the acting industry, and she was explaining that it isn't, and we read out the definition as well, it's not necessarily always going to be about a sex scene. So it's not going to say Tea Time Doctor Who has a sex scene in season 2. But like linking the Decay, any close proximity of actors where there's a hint where you could, you know, I suppose it's safeguarding like we did as a team.
This is so much. So now if an actor gets close to another actor, one face gets close to another face, now requires the intervention of a third party to ensure own safety. How on earth did we all survive up to now before the advent of intimacy coordinators? This is just bum.
But we're playing the intimacy watch, and John, Hugh, and Michelle. If you see State of Decay, are there moments when you think, well, actually, you know, like you said, John, how did we survive? But
I think it's the relationship. Yeah, the relationship between Adric's feet and the floor probably needs an intimacy coordinator, because he wasn't able to get that relationship correctly about how it moves and how they meet each other. So yes, I think we needed an intimacy coordinator for his movements. Smooth moves across a smooth studio floor.
These two did, because if she is actually only 22, and she's just been breeding with the whole village, she will probably need help as the intimacy coordinator, apportions her sleep and break time.
It's not so much for Doctor Who, it's actually the story person. Someone appears and says, "Hello, I'm the intimacy coordinator for Zargo and Friends."
I tell you what, it sounds to me like when you've got the the diversity person who always ends up being somebody very, very gay with rainbow hair in the NHS. It sounds like one of those. I want that job, 70 grand. So yes. So John, you may have missed it on my other stream, but yes, they have actually appointed an intimacy officer, and therefore it's given me rich.
In that case, that now confirms. It now confirms. Full stop. They are no longer making Doctor Who. They're making something that's masquerading as Doctor Who.
And this is not a family show anymore. If you need an intimacy coordinator, this is disgusting. I'm just going to faint. This is disgusting. Yeah. I'm serious. I about gagged when I heard that there was.
It does give me a good excuse when we look at the classics to have Sutek.
Does the intimacy coordinator? Is he going to negotiate whatever position Sutek respectively had on the TARDIS? I mean, you did have him in a very compromising position.
I thought
earlier.
It's a good point, John.
Sometimes they gotta lick themselves somewhere. That's
I think if you look at that picture, I think the TARDIS, which, as you know, is a sentient being, has actually complained to the intimacy coordinator.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
I think that's what's happened there.
Looks like one of his back windows broken.
So, yeah, don't tell Findlay. Don't tell Findlay. So, yeah, exactly. So, if you do recall, we came here to do a review. And
what?
of the State of Decay.
Well, this show is not suitable for tea time.
Yeah, go and watch something else. Why don't you?
Black.
So just to remind everybody, if you're sticking with us, we're looking at Criterion 1 now, okay? So we're going to get serious now. And this is where I really do, keep their feet to the fire a bit, because I've noticed sometimes how panelists can be a little bit sneaky on this. I ask them at the end and say, what rating do you want to give it? And they'll go, oh, it's outstanding, darling. And then, of course, all the way through, they've been nitpicking and stuff. So basically, you're going, hold on a minute. On safeguarding of the program, canon, characterization, is it recognizable Doctor Who? I'll ask them their rating and obviously for an example or so. Okay, so Hugh.
Well, I think it is. I mean, it's written by Sharon Stick, so you've already got that. It does hark back to the Hinchcliffe era. There is sort of like, whether Tom Baker's on full sort of power at the time because of the illness, difficult to say. But the one thing I really like about this is the first episode. I think it's really good. There's also hints there of the humour of Douglas Adams, the bit where he hits the screen in order to get it working. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a very Doctor Who program, and I think, again, as we were saying earlier, it tries a few things, new things, which is good and is consistent with the stuff. Obviously, characterization in terms of Matthew Waterhouse's performance is not something that happens, but that's not to do with this. But I think it's. I think in terms of that criteria, it's definitely Doctor Who.
Do you think? And I'm just keeping an eye on this. That okay, Tom Baker was unwell, but obviously the script was the script. Is there an element where you think Tom Baker, because we know how season 18 was pitched, he's already been an old man in Leisure High, for example. They're kind of playing around with his kind of silhouette. And of course, it's very funereal Logopolis. So is there an element where you think State of Decay just falls into that, where he's a bit slower? 1 minute he's shouting and doing a Henry V speech to the rebels, so to speak, but another minute he's just kind of talking rather than action. Yeah,
I suppose that ties in to an extent with Warrior's Gate, where he's not really the Doctor, Romana is. And so I think there is certainly an aspect to it. Now, whether that's deliberate and whether that is to do with the illness, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think Terence Dicks is writing this to say goodbye to Doctor Who, although there might be an element in terms of Terence Dicks' own writing that he thinks that he won't be writing for very much longer, and obviously only does one more story.
John, where do you stand on Criterion One? I've heard what you've said already, but examples, etc.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. It's absolutely spot on. It's Doctor Who. There's no doubt about that at all. Written by one of his finest writers, certainly one of his finest script editors. Yet all the component parts are there. And while Tom isn't perhaps the best he's been, and his curls have to be curled by a makeup artist or a designer, a costume designer, to make him look more like the Doctor he was, he's still very much on form. I think more traditionally what made it on there was there's a bit of angst between him and Lalla, not between the Doctor and Romana, Tom and Lalla. And I think they're falling out several times during this. He refuses to look at her in certain scenes, refuses to help her down, all because he's not talking to her. But yes, it's absolutely Doctor Who. And in particular, it being Terence Dicks, there's a wonderful scene where the Doctor and Romana are in the cell together, and the Doctor, just like he did do in the last season of John Pertwee's season, refers to his guru, as he had done in The Time Monster. And we got to meet that guru as Campo Rinpoche in The Planet of the Spiders. And he refers to all that. Now, initially, apparently, that was written as a female. Then I think Terence Dicks had reminded himself that he'd written about the old hermit and decided to use that instead. So the season, even now, is at the beginning of the John Nathan Turner, mining its rich past in order to sort of give it a broader canvas to paint on. And I think this is a lovely scene, because when people tell me that the Doctor only started, if you like, being overtly romantic with their companion, I think it's obvious that there's something going on here between the Doctor and Romana. That's quite clear. He calls her wonderful or marvelous, whatever it is, but it's not stuck in your features, with tongue wrestling the way they would do today. And no doubt the intimacy coordinator coming in to wrestle or come in to manage that tongue wrestling. This tells you things all you need to know about the children's past, that Tom Baker is heading towards the door here. He's making references to that glorious past. It almost repeats that element from John Pertwee's final season. And also we get to see how close he is to his female companion, Romana, there, without anything too overt. So as well as mining the mythos, it builds on it too, and in a very Doctor Who type way. So yeah, programs in safe hands with Terence Dicks.
And to add to your point there, that in that cell scene, I quite liked it. Was classic Doctor Who right at the end when the door hits the Doctor. There's a little bit of humor there. That level of humor, I have no problem with in Doctor Who. It's when humor is the whole program. That's the problem.
And that's it. It works again. So that seems to be built. That's a lovely little scene. There's a lot of poignancy involved, and right at the end, a bit of slapstick, and that just gives you a bit of really what Doctor Who covers throughout the piece. And again, you get that because Tom Baker's there, Terence Dicks is writing it. It's Doctor Who, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's undeniable. If I'm going to stick to the criterion here, is it canon? Does it follow, the characterization? Terence Dicks, yes, he knows his stuff. And I was saying earlier before the stream to Hugh that I like the book of this as well, I have to say. No, Terrence Dicks knew what he was doing. He clearly continued to know what he was doing when he did the Five Doctors later. But no,
he basically repeats in the Five Doctors the whole Dark Tower thing. But between below, it's he's very much a fan of the poem "Child Roland to the Dark Tower Goes," because he uses it again in the Five. In fact, he mentions it explicitly in the Five Doctors. But there is that very much above, between, below element of the tower here too.
Do you know, John, I was thinking that with the tower, actually, because I remember even RTD in the Writer's Tale saying he likes a lot of it. He says action is sideways down corridors, and he says, I like to go up and, and we see that in New Earth and all the rest of it. But yes. So I'm forgetting who I've asked now.
Michelle's turn.
My turn.
Michelle's turn.
Michelle's turn. I'm sorry, I misheard. Go on, Michelle. Criterion 1.
It's instantly recognizable Doctor Who. We have Terrence Dicks, who is a very experienced writer, who knows the show, who knows how to write for the show, because he understands his characters. So we have a writer who knows what he's doing. We have two actors, Tom Baker and Lalla Ward, who know their characters, so that even though Tom Baker is ill, he is still able to perform his character. He's still be able to be the Doctor because he knows this like the back of his hand. Lalla Ward's been on the show long enough that she knows her character, so that they are still able to work in a difficult behind-the-scenes work environment, and are able to be professional enough to perform their characters and to perform their roles without personal feelings or putting that aside. So this is instantly Doctor Who. This is also instantly a good example of being professional on set.
I wonder why you're hinting at that. But I agree. Knowing what we know about the behind the scenes, you wouldn't. There's no way you could read into that with how Romana.
Well, you can tell that they're not talking to each other in real life. Regardless, they may hate each other's guts, but they're still going on stage. This is my character. This is my role. I'm professional. I'm going to do my role.
And the only way you know that is Tom Baker doesn't make eye contact with her. But you can even use that as part of the Doctor's characterization, because it makes clear you just wouldn't make eye contact with her, and yet the next day or get to the studio, things have changed and it's all settled in again. But I think you have to be told that to notice that.
The other thing about the scene in the dungeon and the talk is that obviously introduces an element of the Time Lords that is closer to Terrence Dicks's Time Lords than it is to Robert Holmes's Time Lords.
Do you know, and the interesting thing there, because, and I'll save my other comments for the right Criterion, but all this reference to, we in New Who we had the Time War. And in this one, we got to hear about a bloody war between the vampires and the Time Lords. And so suddenly, as you're saying, Terrence Dicks is injecting quite a lot of Time Lord folklore here by talking about another war. This very boring species that apparently the Doctor was so bored with, he had to leave, and sneak away. Suddenly, they seem quite warlike.
No, I'm going to disagree with you there, Brendan. I think they became boring. I think that's the issue the Doctor has, is they became that way. Because what we're told in this story is that it's a direct result of the interference of the Time Lords in the war with the great vampires, that the Time Lords learned a lesson not to interfere anymore.
Right.
That's the message we're getting. And we're told that as a result of that, the Doctor becomes bored. Now, the Doctor's own mythos is built into that. We're meant to believe during the Seventh Doctor's reign that he was there at the beginning with Rassilon and Olmec and all that crew. Although for most of the classic run, we didn't think that, we didn't know that. We just assumed the Doctor had grown up in Gallifrey, or on a Gallifrey that was very much a non-interventionist, splendid isolation type thing. But in this story, we find out, Terrence Dicks builds on the mythos to say this is why the Time Lords became strictly non-interventionists, because they got their fingers burned so badly with this one. And the Doctor became bored by what the Time Lords, not because of what they were, but what they became.
Explains, and also, I think it reinforces it in the Five Doctors, where the Fifth Doctor is profoundly uncomfortable being on Gallifrey. He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't like being around them.
So there you go. I think Criterion 1, as we've got set out, and we've got to stick with that if we're going to compare across all of canon, it is Doctor Who. I mean, you've got one of the custodians of it. So we'll jump to Criterion 2, the production. How did you judge the use of direction, music, set costume design, etc., etc.? Now, I know the gift there, and you see, I've made the argument here, John, Michelle, and Hugh, that this although I can see season 18 as a vast improvement, it is, and it all credit, it needed doing. But within that, on repeat play, I do feel, especially State of Decay, is an element of style over substance.
Really?
Yeah. Theatrical mood. I get it. I know what they're trying to do. Again, I'll give always credit for that. I can see, as Hugh said, I can see episode 1 working probably as the best, building up the atmosphere, the bats and all the rest of it. The trying to make the forest land a bit darker and all the kind of, the wasting and the selection and all that stuff. Although it's very Crotons in that respect.
It is, yeah.
I just found that in the end, and this was my one criticism, my one big criticism of season 18 as an entirety. So you've got two bookends here, John at one end and me at the other. And I do like the series, and I'm glad they did it. Partly because we've all said intention is important in Doctor Who, experimentation is important in Doctor Who, and they went for it here, and it was needed. But when I watch it as a one-off story, I just seem to think, yes, you've got colour, great costumes, brilliant costumes. The sets overall were good, although there's that scene that you mentioned, John, the cell. It's very flat, isn't it? She tried to make it all look metallic, but it looked
rusty, almost rusting. Yeah. Doesn't work.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm doing that, but overall, the music. Can I just say, we've all got the albums of Radiophonic Workshop, and we know some of them really well. And I tell you what, at Cassia's wedding, I can hear them all in my head. But
I thought that was just me. I have Cassia's wedding going on in my head as well. I never knew what a Janissary band was until I heard Snake Dance.
And yeah, exactly. I was about to say the very same thing. So yeah, and the Five Doctors music, when actually it was more musical, but the music here from Paddy Kinsland seemed to take me to where we're going to be in season 19. It's the visitation. This story had a vibe, a feel, a look. I think it's the same blooming forest of the visitation. Because again, you had the villagers who were all with their tech not quite work. I don't know. When I look at Doctor Who in its entirety, and I look at this as a one-off and judge it, I'm thinking, it just has a vibe of something. And you know what? Well, we're still recording audio now. I was recording the audio of this. And as a fan of Doctor Who at the time, I cannot deny that when you play back State of Decay, all I can hear is Paddy Kinsland's music, and there's hardly any dialogue.
Hold on that point alone, let me ask you. On the audio, how does Adric cross the TARDIS?
He's much better.
Is it? Glad to hear it.
In fact, John, you don't notice Adric at all because he creeps like.
So basically, he works as a radio actor.
Yes. It's like saying
radio best turned off.
It's like saying I've got a face for radio, isn't it? It's
has been vastly improved in Big Finish.
I've got a walk for radio.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing is, if you could have the sound of mince walking, because it's definitely mincing that bit across the TARDIS.
Oh, that'd get you a job now as well. So, so Hugh, on Criteria 2, we're getting into the nuts and bolts of the production.
So again, it starts off and it looks really good and stuff. Absolutely, I think the music is interesting and it possibly outstars some of the acting. So one of the things I was saying to Brendan before everyone came on is I didn't see this at the time. I'm not sure why. I think I probably missed the first 2 episodes because of something, and then didn't. And then it took me, I think, 15 years before I saw it. And I don't know whether that 15 years has changed my what I looked at. But I did feel that Emrys James was just too over the top, and I also thought the relationship between the sort of like king and queen and Orcon just seemed a bit messy. And again, it's this whole thing about, well, I didn't really get how the structure of the story worked and stuff like that. There weren't enough people in order to do this. The discussion about the state of decay, the de-evolution of a society, I get why ruling class wants to restrict knowledge. I didn't really understand it here, other than going, we've restricted knowledge, therefore we can have vampires that look like medieval vampires rather than people from space, and I that didn't work. So I thought, and I'm not sure whether some of that's because of the clash between Turnstix and Bidmead, and whether things would have worked better in the earlier version. So I think the first episode is really good. By the time it's got to episode 3, like perhaps the British public, I wasn't feeling it, and it gets. Does it? I don't mind the hand coming out of the grave, but I'm a bit baffled as to how you managed to hit the heart of something like that, and it just feels a bit too neat. So I don't think this carries through. So I think there's possibly the conflict between what was going on there has affected the story's consistency.
Well, on your judgment, Hugh, obviously a couple of things you were saying there, and I'm going to sound like a right blooming teacher. It sounds like it's criteria 3, on engagement and resolution of plot.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way the construction. It's very difficult sometimes to separate 2 and 3 out in terms of that. But certainly in terms of the acting, I felt was just didn't quite work, and in terms of the structure of the story, didn't quite work, and it was nicely done, and then went a bit off.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree on the Orcon point. Rewatching it again, I just thought, oh God, how do we slag off Graham Cowden all the time in Horns of Nymon, and he gets away with it free on this one? Because I actually thought that moment when he's he's already possessed anyway. Why am I saying possessed? But when he's talking to the Doctor and Romana, he goes a bit, and it is lighter voice, and I thought, oh God, I can't stand it. I thought it needed pulling back as well, actually. But anyway, I've said my piece on Criterion 2. So next cab on the rank, is it John?
Has Michelle had Criterion 2?
Not yet.
Go on for Michelle. I'm living in the moment, so I'm forgetting who I've asked.
It's all right. Yeah. The thing I'll give it high marks for is the costuming. I'm a costume person. I enjoy the idea of it being in outer space on this foreign planet, but they're dressing in a medieval clothing. I think the one thing Doctor Who gets a little too stale with, especially modern Who, everyone's always in jumpsuits and tracksuits and spacesuits. It gets a little boring because we're out in the world and out in the universe. Not everyone's going to be dressing the same. So I really would love to see that being brought in more of a variety of costuming, that this idea that this is a society that even though they have technology, they're kind of regressing a little bit. So they have a kind of a pastiche of time periods and culture. That I think is fascinating and something we should see more in Doctor Who. Yeah, the acting was not the best. It definitely was not the best. The one, it was like I was watching with my dad this morning, and he caught a really funny blooper where when the resistance is going through the hallway after they've zapped and killed the soldiers, and one of the resistance extras steps on one of the soldiers.
Yes.
And you see him react to it. It was like, oh my that was hysterical.
Yes. And there's it got near 10 p.m. So
he got need. That was maybe that's what they need the intimacy coordinator for. Don't step on your co-stars.
Very true. you know, on your point about you would love to see how sci-fi plays with like medieval image and as if they've regressed, etc. Right?
Mhm.
I couldn't help, and Jamie was saying the same thing when we watched this. Face of Evil, the consonantal shift, and then of course you had the fact that they go savage. So it's kind of. Do you think it's done too much in sci-fi though? That they either go for shiny costumes. I agree with you. You know, I'll wear tinfoil, and that means it's futuristic. Or you go into they have to go back to savage, and Face of Evil did that.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah. I just think right now we're too much in the shiny tinfoil era. I like to see a little more balance and diversity, especially once because here in the United States we're really into talking about is there life outside of our own, and what would that look like, and would it look exactly like us? And the answer, of course, is no. So this idea that they're all going to look exactly the same, and also on who like all the spaceships are starting to look the same. This idea of all these little proto International Space Station looks.
I mean, I think it was mentioned a minute ago. Didn't you think that with the landing of the spaceship, which Hugh mentioned, which is kind of our Criterion thing, we'll come back to it, but it was a bit SpaceX. the landing.
Now we know
was
where
so
Elon
good.
Musk got his ideas for.
Yeah, I thought, do you know what? We were all applauding SpaceX for that amazing landing recently, but actually the Doctor had it accomplished in State of Decay.
You know what? Like everyone says The Simpsons predicts the future. Maybe we should give more credit to Doctor Who predicting the future.
Very true. So I think so far what I'm hearing is Criterion 1, well, it has to be a tick. It's Terrence Dicks and he does understand his characters and Tom Baker knows his role, blah, blah, blah. Criterion 2, overall, it's looking more polished. Yes, we've all got little niggles, but it's still scoring. So I think the one that may be more of a debate.
I've not done my Criterion.
I'm sorry, John. Yeah, like I said, I promise you, I'm just living in the moment. So I go on, John. Go for it.
Two. I got my two Criterion.
Yeah, of course.
Two. So yeah, practically everything that's been said regarding that, it does look better. Doctor Who hasn't looked this good since the Hinchcliffe era, so yeah, it does look good. The issue, I think, as we've already mentioned with this story in particular, is that you have a script and a director rubbing up against the script editor who didn't want it to look like that. So there's a lot of misfires, a lot of different things not happening that should be happening. And so they're trying to show this is a society in a state of decay. So therefore that's regressing. But it's odd to see people dressed as medieval monarchs and aristocracy at the same time talking about space travel and all the rest of it. And there's an element of Kalmar and his crew knowing that there's something scientific here. So they must have learned that from somewhere. But at the same point, there's a whole rustic and medieval thing going on. So I get the mismatch there, but I blame that and Christopher Bidmead they just left the original script alone and allowed Peter Moffat to do that, we may well have had a better show. But Doctor Who looks great. Costumes are brilliant. I'm going to disagree entirely with the acting. I think this is a very theatrical script. It's directed by a very theatrical Doctor Who director, and the performances therefore are theatrical. Peter Moffat talks about moving the actors around in what he describes as a quadrille, as they say the lines and move around. So it's very, very. There could well be a proscenium arch put in front of this, and it wouldn't look out of place. And guess what? 2 weeks later or so, when this is over, you get Warriors Day, where everything's all taken away and you're just acting against a blue backdrop, basically. So Doctor Who can do this stuff. And, if you don't like it, you mentioned watching it as a one-off story, Brendan, you found it a bit jarring. But these programs were never meant to be watched as one-off stories. They were meant to be watched as a part of a season. So if you didn't like this, something maybe better be along in a couple of weeks' time and keep you entertained. But very much a product of a writer and a director trying to do one thing, a script editor trying to do another. And I think the director view won out in terms of the acting performances. And I'm happy with that. And I don't think it's Emrys James. It's anywhere near Graham Crowden's. I think you're wrong in that entirely. Graham Crowden's chewing the scenery and virtually winking at the camera. Emrys James is getting a very theatrical performance, which you might not like, but it's not doing that knowing wink this is Doctor Who, it's for the kiddies, which Graham Crowden is basically doing. So I disagree heartily with that. But yeah, Doctor Who looks very, very, I think it looks quite sumptuous.
Yeah,
and I'm very happy with it. Yeah, so this is not just a little tick for me again, this is another big tick.
Okay. What I will say is, wherever State of Decay stands in your estimation of all of Who, it has to be given credit for one thing big time, which is last Christmas, the Goblin King was killed by a church impaling him. And to be quite honest, as soon as I saw that, were you thinking the same thing?
Well, it went in the wrong way. It went up him rather than down him.
Well,
you know what I mean? I was waiting for the Goblin King to channel Clive Dunn in Dai's Army, as they all shouted. They don't like it up him. Because that's basically what happened to him. But yeah, very simple. But you know what? Let's not go back to the Goblin King.
Maybe that's also why they need an intimacy coordinator. So when you get impaled, you're not getting it up your bum.
I won't make a song and dance about it then. So we've got Criterion 3, which is I think might be the tasty one, because in the end it's basically saying it can look as beautiful as it wants, it can have as much money lavished on it as possible, but did it actually engage? Just like I was saying to Hugh a minute ago, he seemed to be challenging the resolution a little bit. Are you happy with the resolution, or was it just, predictable, blah blah blah? Was it a good story? Was it well written? Bottom line is, it's supposed to be drama. It's supposed to be engage. So let's rattle around the panel. But I think I'm going to be in a minority of one here. But John,
good story, but it's been mucked about too much, because apparently a lot of the stuff had been taken out, had to be replaced. It was replaced obviously half-heartedly by the script editor, and I have a lot of time for what Chris Bidney did with season 18, absolutely. But I think in this instance he was absolutely wrong to tinker with it. The director and the cast were obviously not happy with the changes, so we ended up with not exactly a halfway house, but something approaching that, which damages, I think, the overall product. I don't think it could ever have been a classic, but it could have been a whole lot better than it ultimately was, and I think that's down to Bidney's interference. Turner 6 is a very safe pair of hands when it comes to Doctor Who. He delivers the goods, and he does so here, and it's the tinkering that I think has ultimately affected what could have been not an excellent story, not even a very good story, but a solidly really good story.
Can I ask you one thing while we're talking about the story itself? This bit wouldn't fit into the Peter Moffat discussion, etc. This is about Terrance Dicks, the writer, and this story. When you look at the whole narrative flow and then the resolution, do you feel that it was sometimes you can get ahead of it and it's a bit predictable, but I thought, I thought, was it a mistake that too early on the Doctor had sussed that it was the rocket? It was too early on that he was kind of onto some suspicion that they weren't what they were saying. That I don't know. I thought we got the answers quite early on.
No, I don't think so. No. I think it's, with 40 years of hindsight, you could maybe pick it apart that way. No, I don't think so. And I've only got to deal with how I saw it at the time, and I didn't think that at all. And for real bad storytelling and how things are signposted to you, I direct you to anything that Chris Chibnall wrote for Doctor Who. That's the hack, Chris Chibnall, in case you've forgotten, where the doctor stops taking part in the story, turns to camera and tells you exactly why this is there, that's there, and the other's there. What lets the story down ultimately is the effect at the end. They really should have invested more in that. And so that's what really, even at the time, it was let down, because I remember thinking it looked shoddy at the time. It doesn't look shoddy 40 years on. It was shoddy at the time. And I think that lets it down. And again, that's a fault of the director, because Peter Moffat was more than happy. Oh, don't worry, darling, it'll be fine. A bit like Alan Bromley was with the explosion at the end of The Time Warrior. And it wasn't. These are directors who are not interested in effects, not interested in the sort of the sci-fi element of the production.
Yeah.
And that's why you ended up, I think that, I didn't get, how I dealt with it at the time, Brendan, I didn't get the whole tower is stake, which is going to end up through the heart. And although Hugh mentioned earlier on, it had to be a good aim for it to, who cares? It's Doctor Who, there's a whole lot of stuff. You just leave your brain at the door and just enjoy the ride. And I think that was good. Had the effect been better, it would have been even better.
This is where I think in what for Criterion 1, it's classic Doctor Who, which is that inventiveness that you don't normally get in other sci-fi to actually do that sort of thing. You saw in Nightmare of Eden and stuff like that. Very inventive Doctor Who. But my issue is that, for example, you've got the Fourth Doctor, your hero, in 4 episodes, and it seemed to me one of the strongest things about the episode as a story, or the dialogue, was giving Tom Baker lines about the past. And I know what you're saying, and I agree with you, John, about how Chibnall could do exposition instead of drama, basically. It's like, here, I'm going to explain it on a PowerPoint for you.
It wasn't even just exposition, Brendan. Everybody stopped acting, turned to camera, and spouted out words.
You see, but you see, what I would say here is, and obviously it's not to be compared, but is you gave the Fourth Doctor lots of lines about the past, the vampires of the past, the Great One. Then and a lot of the 4 episodes is these lovely moments. I remember with my audio tape going, "Oh God, this is great! It's atmospheric," but it had nothing to do with the actual story happening. It was all about before. And I don't know if that's a bit of a mistake. You want more things happening now. Yeah, there's always an epilogue or a prologue, but I don't know. I felt as though we weren't living as much in the present.
I don't get that. Doctor Who's all about words and talking, because it can't afford effects. I mean, it can do effects. Sometimes it blows them and gets them wrong, like it does at the end of this story. So yeah, I love the scene setting. We can't see the battle between the Time Lords and the great vampires. So Tom Baker waxes lyrical about it, and it's lovely. And then when he does the whole thing about looking into how to defeat this, and we get the printout and all this sort of stuff, I love all that. That is so typically and wonderfully Doctor Who.
Criterion 3, well, you can see me and John are going to be at slight opposites here, but Michelle, where do you
never happened before, has it?
I know.
No, never. Oh my goodness, no. I'm really agreeing with what everyone is saying. It's on paper, it looks like it could be a decent story. I think there's some issues that if they had just tweaked it a little bit, it would have been a good or a solid episode. It kind of reminds me of those. We all see them every season. The middle of the season episode where they quite don't know what they're doing. It's like, okay, we got to fill this time space. Let's put something on there because it's not quite building up to the resolution of the season finale. So it feels very much like a middle of the road, middle of the season. It's not good enough to be an opener. It's not good enough to be a closer. It's just kind of like it's there to fill up some time space.
Yeah, I totally concur with that, and that's what I was saying with you earlier about this e-space thing is like a detour that wasn't needed, but it's interesting, but it wasn't necessarily. It's like a filler to make the season longer, I suppose.
And also figure out how they're going to let Lalla Ward go. How we're going to leave her out, and it's something kind of interesting, storyline, and bringing in some new companions.
Yeah,
who can walk properly.
Well, Sarah's son can walk properly. I'll give her that. I mean, and she is doing it in heels. I mean, I cannot walk in heels. So anyone who can walk in heels,
She can do everything Matthew Waterhouse does backwards and in heels.
Yes.
So Hugh, where do you stand on Criterion 3? Did it?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's almost I agree with almost everything everyone said as well. I think it's just about how you feel with the episodes. I got bored about somewhere in the middle of 3. I say I struggled with the way it was going. I think there's it is that thing that there feels as if there are bits cut out that would have made it work better, and bits put in that made it work worse.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's always interesting. I mean, we were so grateful to have Doctor Who and Doctor Who going for it. And JNT, I don't know if he got Johnny, I don't know if he got a bigger budget for season 18, but he just made it look better.
No, he didn't have a bigger budget. What he did was, because of his progress on the BBC, his career, he knew how to spend the budget effectively. Yeah, absolutely effectively. He knew how to put the money up front.
Yeah, so I'm grateful for that, but we all know Doctor Who of old, you have 28 episodes, stuff like that. And there's always one that felt a little bit more like, well, I'm glad they did it, but it's just continuing the season. Now it's too short and all the rest of it. But there we go. Now, just before we finish, bit of mirth here. I say a bit of mirth, but it'll get our curmudgeon John going.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Wait a minute. What do you mean curmudgeon?
Well, it just sounded good. I'm sorry, I was just waxing lyrical, you know.
Curmudgeon.
Yeah.
He's living in the moment. He's living the dream.
Living the dream. So, well, talking about living the dream, Michelle, I'm going to segue to somebody who's always living the dream, honey, babe, darling. Here we go. Fast and speedy, here we go. So what would they... I do this deliberately, though, whether you think it's relevant or not. What I love to do is compare classic Who to new Who, and I think that really sometimes exposes things. We know what the 15th Doctor's been presented like.
Yeah.
I then put the 15th Doctor into some classic situations. So here, this is when the 4th Doctor and Romana arrived at the village and he introduced himself. Now, of course, our 15th Doctor wouldn't be understated, would he? How would you think it could have been done if it was remade now?
Burst through the door and says, "Show me the living, baby."
Yeah.
You're looking for some breeding? Sorry, that's sorry, true.
Unfortunately, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
That's
sort of like again, it's Tom Baker is not a subtle actor, but the characterization is subtle.
Yeah.
And things like this, and he's got so much backup in terms of how he does that makes it nice and easy. It would just be the doors would get smashed back, and I think the intimacy coordinator would be working overtime.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. The same. I'm sure that the 15th Doctor would have gone straight to the handsome guard, flirted with them, ended up in the bushes, and Romana would have her blood sucked dry. Poor Romana. He's too busy in the bushes with the guards.
John, you're very right. I didn't think of that one, that basically none of this story would have happened. He'd have stayed in the wood.
Yeah, it would have been. I don't know. I mean, what sort of was it? Was that part of E-Space quite cruisy?
I know. Well, I don't think it was well populated, so you'd be looking for just somebody virile and younger. I mean, gosh.
I think the 15th Doctor might have found himself quite at home with Kalmar and his friends.
So, but what was good here, I referenced it quickly, is they tried to do the salute like the Three Wise Monkeys, and of course the Tom Baker Doctor tried to copy it, a bit like Pertwee did. It was very good with the Draconians, you know, very good. He was very respectful and honored their race. So there's that one. What about this one then? Our 15th Doctor put into this now. The 15th Doctor's wouldn't be in this scene, just like the 4th Doctor wasn't, but the 4th Doctor may have noticed the cast and may have noticed, like Orcon, that they all looked similar. And like in Dot and Bubble, I can only imagine our 15th Doctor would shout, maybe spit a bit, and say, "Haven't you noticed? You are all..." It's like Dot and Bubble. They're all of a certain age and they're all white, etc., etc. And just like RTD wrote it to give us a rise, here, I think the 15th Doctor would be very triggered.
Well, then he'd cry.
You would cry, yeah.
And then send them off to their doom. Send them off to their doom. They're not going to make it.
I suppose instead of saying give me the loving, he'd be saying find me the loving. He'd be trying to find somebody a bit younger.
Or he might just stand there with Adric and show him how to mince properly to the door. You know.
Yes, this is here's the mark, baby.
Yeah.
What about this one then? The Zargo and Camilla were saying he's selected because he's the Time Lord and, you know, he's got richer blood and all the rest of it. I would have thought the 15th Doctor would have been quite diva-ish and touched by the fact that he was special and considered special. We said in our review that this was quite a staged theatrical feel, deliberately. That was the style. And that would fit the 15th Doctor, actually, who, as you know, we often find in corridors, hitting the wall and just sitting and not knowing what to do when he sees Sutek. He's very static. So I think the 15th Doctor may have fitted this a bit more when he faces his mortal enemy.
And then frozen in terror.
Yes.
Again, not having any idea of how to defeat it. And granted, this 4th Doctor isn't very similar. This is the immortal enemy of the Time Lords, and yet he still figures out a way to come on top.
Exactly. You shouldn't.
John, get out of here! No, nothing on that comment.
I was going to say, this one was the key. I think it was episode 3 when, of course, Orcon was working on the Doctor, and you have. I think if I'm remembering rightly, this is when he said, you're going to serve us, and the Doctor refused to serve. The Doctor refused to kind of be defeated. We've seen him do it many times with Sutekh, for example, in Pyramids of Mars, when I will not, and you can see how the power of the brain can affect him. Any little nuggets here where you think the 15th Doctor may have presented this differently?
You have been defeated.
I don't want to do this anymore because it just means, again, Russell Davies and his current creation, are living rent-free in my head, I just don't want to about this anymore, so
well, let's try.
I like it as is.
Well, let's try one more. In episode 4, the TARDIS, it was interesting what K9 said, because K9, which we haven't mentioned much today, but K9 had a moment. How can K9, by the way, be outfoxed by Adric's logic at the beginning? Remember that? But in this bit, that he was told by K9 that because we're in East space and it's a smaller thing, these short hops might be more accurate. I do miss the TARDIS being inaccurate. I do miss the TARDIS having a problem. But anyway, he lands where the rebel base is, and he arrives, and he basically says, "Halt! Don't move. Sorry to drop in." Which obviously, when the 15th Doctor arrived at UNIT and said, "Give me the lovin'," had a slightly different tone. But anybody got any thoughts for a bit of mirth on this one? His arrival in the TARDIS with the rebels, all those men.
Well, they had a ramp there, so the idea that the TARDIS has never had a ramp. Come on, how do you think K9 got out?
Michelle, you mentioned the ramp. Did anybody notice? I'm sure you did. It was so blooming obvious. In the castle, why did the castle have a ramp?
Well, I think we knew what was going to happen at the end, and the designer just had to make sure that there wasn't going to be any Dalek type problems. Yes, so yeah. Although what the actor also made sure of, Michelle mentioned earlier about the actor getting kicked and moving. There's also a very great scene where one of the actors gets shot and has to die on his side to ensure that K9 can traverse past them and go on his
very nice on his end to die.
It was, yeah.
That's not give props to the actor. Going on your side, that's not a fun. You get hit wrong going down.
It's a tough way. It's bad enough to go, but to have to go on your side.
Yeah, because for stage falling, they either teach you to go on your stomach or go on your back. So him going on the side, that's that. Kudos to him.
This was always the issue. You noticed when there was a Dalek mini massacre in Doctor Who in the studio, when there's all these bodies everywhere, and they're going to have to cut now because there's no way that Dalek can get past all those bodies.
Like a room over can't go forward. There's enough.
So I think what Ncuti would have done in the last scene would have been to say, "Yes, it is a gun in my pocket, and I am pleased to see you."
Oh
gosh. Dear me, we've got such respect for this season. So, our final judgments, everybody, and I've been playing around with the gadgets, John. Watch it. Yeah. Our Ofsted. Here we go. So, see if you like this. It's like a bad night out. Rings of fire.
Yeah. What was it? What was it?
What do you mean?
Was that something new?
Well, yes, because before I used to just chuck a card at you and say it's a judgment.
In the United States, that's what
I thought it was going to come on after.
In the United States, that's what happens. In the United States, that's what happens when you talk about.
I'm just waiting for the thing you brought.
What?
Is that it?
I mean, my flask could walk on.
Right. Okay. It was wonderful.
I'm trying my best. I put more work into the intimacy bit.
Yes.
Yeah, I was very impressed that you turned that round as quickly as you did.
Yes, considering the intimacy coordinator may have to interfere with your rings.
So I'll start off with moi. and then I'll ask John, then Michelle, then Hugh. That's the way it will help with my slides. But basically, we're asking our outstanding Doctor Who story, good overall. Then it's needs improvements. Then it's special measures. That's how we've always done it, so it makes sense to keep it that way. So on my scoring, I am basically going to give it requires improvement, and it's for it. I'm not going to repeat everything. There's no need for that. But my problem was it a good overall Doctor Who story? And my problem was, and the reason why I dipped it down was on engagement. I'm not engaged by episodes 2 and 3 particularly. Anyway, that I won't elaborate anymore. There's no need to do that. So that's my judgment. And of course, we've got a range of people here. That's why we call it the Sense Sphere. So as I come to you, John, what's your judgment of State of Decay?
Yeah, again, and I've made my position quite clear, so I won't repeat myself. Mine is good. And I think unfortunately, this had the ability perhaps to veer towards outstanding had there not been a clash between the script editor, the script writer, and the director here. It led to a bit of a muddle in how the story ultimately came across, and an effect at the end, which even then let the story down. But still, nonetheless, it is solid Doctor Who. And I can go back to it again and again and again. So for that reason, it's a good.
Okay. And obviously, keeping my order right here, Michelle, what's your judgment?
I would put it as needs improvement. It had the chance to be a good overall story if we just cut down a few things, and definitely it could have gone outstanding if they actually fed Adric to the vampires.
Yes.
Near the episode 4, I was going, eat Adric, eat Adric.
Feed him feet first, because there were no use to him as those feet.
So, Hugh, you're in the Shirley Ballas position, which is when you've got two.
Wait a minute, is that not actionable? That phrase.
So, yes, it's like you've got the cast and vote here at the moment. You've got 2 requires improvement and 1 overall good. So,
all right. So I think it's very difficult because it's such a patchy story in terms of that. I think the first episode is really good. I will give it a good simply by taking Adric out of it.
Yes.
I think that's a big problem with all of it, because I think that actually has a huge effect on the story. Is not having someone from the village doing the Adric role, because it makes them all look like idiots. So I think overall, I think it's good. I do think it could really have been outstanding if it had been done properly, but I think there was just too much in it. But as I say, it's patchy, so there are bits which drag me to needs improvement. But it's fine in terms of, because it's so Doctor Who, and because it's a good performance by Tom Baker. Then I think it scrapes into the good. And as I say, I'm taking Adric out because that's that student teacher that they've brought in for the first time ever to do something that can't control the class ever. It's that, and I think that's slightly unfair on the story. And if you put Adric in, it needs improvement. But if you put Adric into anything, it needs improvement.
So being, I don't know, having assembled this panel, and it's 2-2 on improved and good. That's always a sloppy way of finishing. So I'll have the casting vote. No, so
you're not Shirley.
So yeah, I'm not Shirley, but
don't call me Shirley.
For the sake of
really, you can't be serious.
So,
never too early for a needs improvement from Shirley.
Yeah, there's no 10 here. I know what you were saying, Hugh, but you were basically saying if Adric wasn't in it, and the blooming thing was he was.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you can probably take it in that sense. If you want it to be fair, then yeah, it would need improvement. But I think it's so affected by that it's a little unfair.
There you go then, just to make it a tidy ending there. So you make your own judgment having watched, and thank you. Like and subscribe. Join us again. Thank you. It's great to have us all back.
You're getting 6 months.
Yeah. Make it a date. Timey-wimey. So thanks everybody. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Michelle.
Bye, everyone.
I was going to
Bye-bye.
thank Elsie and Finley, but they seem to have disappeared.
No, listen, they went off to have dinner. Hugh, see you Friday.
See you Friday.
See you then.